We got dogs barking at the start of the show. Right? It was perfectly timed. Hello. I am Eric Samulski. Welcome to the Rotoworld Fantasy Baseball Show. I am joined by my co-host, as always, Scott Pianowski, and a special guest, former host of the pod, DJ Short. Welcome back, DJ.
Oh, it feels good to be back. It's like I never left. Like riding a bike.
Just gotta get right back on there. We are going to discuss some news and notes up at the top real quick, and then Scott and DJ and I, along with 10 other people, participated in the Yahoo Friends and Family draft on Monday night. We did a draft a month into the season, looking at basically just trying to see how would we recalibrate things if we knew what we knew now. Where would pitchers go? Which hitters would fast rise up. So we're going to really dig into that. And hopefully that will give you a sense of, how we 13 people who drafted feel about how real some of this early season is, some different strategies that we have in terms of roster building that even though you might not be redrafting, even though you can on Yahoo, but even if you're not, you can look at like how you might want to build your team for the rest of this year. Scott, the dogs are okay now?
Apparently. I can't make any guarantee for the next hour, but great to be with you, Eric. Great to have DJ back in the saddle. The draft was so much fun. I can't wait to talk about it. Although it's amazing we drafted Monday night, and it's just the baseball cycle. This baseball season feels like a football season where there's just players, going down left and right. And I don't take any joy in that, especially when somebody like Mike Trout getting hurt. But I feel like there's just, really important things, really, seismic things happening every day. It's crazy.
In fact, 30 minutes ago, we got news that Grayson Rodriguez was headed to the IL. Obviously, this is very fresh news. By the time you're listening to this, you may know more about timelines and the nature of the injury. All we know is that he has right shoulder inflammation, and he will be put on the IL. Obviously, anytime you hear shoulder and inflammation for a pitcher, it's not ideal. Even if there winds up not being any sort of tear or major injury, we're probably looking at least a month, 6 weeks without Grayson Rodriguez, as he has to shut it down completely and build back up. DJ, we'll throw it to you since you're back here with us. Obviously, you're just putting Rodriguez on your IL. You're not doing anything drastic, but what is your concern level right now? If you have Grayson Rodriguez, is there just a feeling of hopelessness and nothing else?
I don't know. I want to be a little optimistic. His most recent start, his velocity was normal, so that's good. The other things, the Orioles were going to be faced with this situation where they were going to have too many starters. With John Means and Kyle Bradish coming back. So not to say this is like a phantom injury or something. Maybe it's a legitimate, like, hey, my shoulder's been barking a little bit. See what I did there? But since they were going to have to make this decision, and like everyone's been pitching well in that rotation, Cole Irvin has been pitching well, Dean Kremer has been pitching well. It's like, who do you boot out of there? Maybe it's just kind of works out timing wise for them to give him a little bit of a break. That's the optimist take. I don't know. Like you said, we don't really know all the details yet, but that's kind of the optimist view.
And just to your point, May 1st today, John Means had to be activated from his rehab assignment. So they couldn't have pushed Means any further. Like, he had to join the Major League roster today. So that does connect to what DJ was saying. Scott, you mentioned at the top, we obviously had the Mike Trout injury, torn meniscus. He's going to undergo surgery. The reports on Tuesday night were that it was not going to be season ending. However, the exact timeline has not been updated since then. If you have Mike Trout on your team and you know that he's having knee surgery, you obviously know the history of injuries with him, but you know the team is optimistic it's not season ending. How are you handling this?
I don't know if this is executable, but I am in take what I could get mode with Mike Trout. I did not draft Mike Trout at all. He was a heavy fade for me because of the injury history and because of I thought was a slight deterioration in his game. He started to lose his ability to catch up with those fastballs above the belt. Now, it was off to a great start despite the low batting average. He obviously has 10 home runs. He was running again. But it's no fun to play fantasy baseball like an actuary, but I mean, just look at the games played log, of the last 5-6 years. I mean, Mike Trout has needed significant time off every season. It's just a part. He's basically having, and again, this is no fun to say, but he's like having Ken Griffey's career. Ken Griffey was unbelievable in his 20s and was maybe the face of baseball. And like, are you a Bonds guy? Are you a Griffey guy? And then in his 30s was hurt a lot and was just not the same player. And, we had a really fun month of Trout. I don't know what the market is because everybody obviously knows that he's hurt. It's indefinite, and the Angels aren't going anywhere. I mean, they haven't been a dumpster fire, but they're not going to be a playoff team. They don't have a playoff roster. They certainly can't withstand Ohtani leaving off season and now losing Trout. The only bright side to this is that if you were trying to sell yourself on Joe Adell, his spot in the lineup just got a little bit more secure. A player like Luis Rengifo, with all the injuries they've had, he goes from like a super utility player to somebody who has to play every day. And I think he's a sneaky, useful player. It's funny. There aren't any more front men in this offense because they just lost 2 gigantic players in the last, off season and beginning of this year. But they have a lot of like players I still like. I mean, we liked Zach Neto before the season. He hasn't done much. He has percolated to the top of the lineup here and there. I think he had a home run this week. I still like him long-term. O'Hoppy's an interesting catcher. Brandon Drury covers a bunch of positions. He hasn't hit much to start the season. These are all really nice guys. Like for the top of the first player off your bench, or that rover on a short Thursday, or if you're in a deeper league, you may be starting those guys. I think I took Rengifo in the Friends and Family draft. It doesn't mean the Angels are going to be relevant. Back to Trout, though. I would, if somebody in your league is miraculously injury free and they have those IL spots open, they have as DJ would say, the license to ill. Maybe you try to make a trade for Trout, and you have to sell them at a major discount. But I'd be prepared to do so.
Yeah, and I mean DJ NFBC formats, I think he's a drop, right?
Yeah, I mean we'll know more after the procedure.
That's
I think
true.
It's one of those
After the surgery,
And meniscus, like at least it's not like an ACL, MCL.
Right, exactly.
Like we'll see, but sometimes with the meniscus, it can be a little bit longer. And I don't know if this is true. How much of this is just like anecdotal in recent years? Does it seem like Trout is a slow healer, whereas like when you think about Bryce Harper, he's like a fast healer. So I'm going to take the longer side of whatever window they give us.
Sure. I mean, and as you guys all also know, like the healing process is definitely impacted by age. And at age 33, Trout's healing might be slowing down a little bit.
I would also think when he comes back, that whole idea that he's going to run, why would they let him run anymore? I got to figure that plug is getting pulled for the rest of the season.
I just let him DH too. I mean, I'm sure there's like a pride aspect, even to him playing center field. I think there's a pride aspect to it, but like, someone's got to, whisper in his ear and be like, hey, dude, let's, take it easy, especially after the surgery. And I still wouldn't, like if he comes back and he plays well, I think the Angels are going to be I mean, they're already not good. I think they're going to be a terrible baseball team without Mike Trout. If he comes back and feels good, I still think there's a chance he could be traded.
Yeah,
DH is where he needs to be, though.
It's time. It's time to move. It's time to say, "Hey, hell of a job. We're going to build a statue of you. After you retire and all that stuff. We enjoyed the 3 playoff games you played. It was never your fault. It was never Ohtani's fault. But give him a chance to be on. I don't know, the Braves. It feels like the Dodgers get anybody they want, or the Yankees, or one of the glamour teams. Maybe one of the NL Central teams decides to go for it, right? What if the Brewers decide, oh, we're in it, and they go for Trout, or the Cubs need that one more piece. Yeah, just Cleveland. When you look great in Cleveland, man, they need a thumper, right? They're all about contact and singles and doubles. Wouldn't you like to see Mike Trout DHing in the middle of that lineup? That would be fun. So give this guy a chance.
All Kyle Manzardo owners are like, shut up, Scott. No, like that's his spot. This guy's mashing in AAA. They got to call him up at some point.
I know we have a lot to get to, but I know we have a lot to get to, but I think if Trout gets traded, he's going to tell them exactly where he wants to go.
Oh, for sure.
And the Angels will do that.
They'll make it happen. Yeah.
Yes.
Scott did mention Joe Adell. Just interesting to note, it's only been 1 game, but last night Joe Adell hit second against a righty which was not where he was hitting when Trout was healthy. He was hitting up in the order against lefties, but he was hitting 6th or 7th against righties. So it's sixth, 7th against righties. So it's possible Joe Adell moves up in the order to like the 2-hole, just across the board now.
Still just 25 years old, man. I mean,
yeah.
we love post-type sleepers, right? I mean, it feels like he should be old enough to retire because he was relevant so many years ago. But he looks, other than the stolen base percentage not being where we want it to be, I see all these positive signs. It's a small sample, of course, but the plausible upside, we're past that. He's actually putting productive stats on the board, and they're going to play him every day. They have no reason not to.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway from all this, we'll move on to other news and notes, is just I think about like when my son starts looking, like in 30 years, when my son looks at stats and he's going to say, why did you guys talk about Mike Trout as one of the best players ever? Like, if you look at his numbers, he's in line with so many other players. And it's just, when you look back at people who weren't able to watch him play, and you just look at his numbers in the midst of other numbers, and you have to try to say, well, no, it was injuries and his career tailed off. But when he was 28, it looked like he was going to be blah, 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 blah. And that's unfortunate, because I don't know that people who didn't get a chance to see him play are going to truly understand like just how good he was based on looking at his overall career numbers.
It's a pinch of Griffey, and it may be even, and this is before our time, of course, maybe it's even a pinch of Mickey Mantle, who was unbelievable in his 20s and was, the fastest player in baseball, a switch hitter, unbelievable power. And then when his body betrayed him, and of course, Mick didn't take the best care of himself. Everybody died early in his family. He didn't think he would live long. Then you saw that Mays, who was equally his talent anyway, he had a better career. And Henry Aaron was just great for like 23 years in a row, whatever it was. One of the most underrated superstars in baseball history. So they had better careers. And Mantle even said he was ashamed of his career. The guy hit 536 home runs. He won at least one or two Triple Crowns, I want to say. Most beloved probably player of his generation, along with Willie Mays. I mean, he had nothing to be ashamed of. But I think when Trout's career is over, we're going to be saying Griffey and we're going to be saying Mantle, both in the good ascent and then the frustrating kind of depressing descent.
Yeah, sure. Young players on the rise is a smooth transition here from Mike Trout. But we did get 2 call-ups this week. DJ, I'm curious your interest in either of these guys. Tyler Black, who is listed on Yahoo at second base, third base, should be playing some first base for Milwaukee, we would assume, as he gets more at-bats. However, he is currently starting – he is actually starting at first base today, even though they somehow also decided to get Jake Bauers and Rhys Hoskins in the lineup. But whatever, that's a conversation for later. So Tyler Black, who might be first base, second base, third base eligible in Milwaukee, or Jordan Beck, who is outfield eligible in Colorado. DJ, any interest in either one of these guys?
I like both of them. Honestly, I mean, they're great venues for offense. That goes without saying. I like the potential multi-position eligibility with Black. Runs a bit more than Beck, so he's got that in his back pocket as well. But, there's power, there's patience. I think there's reason to be excited about both of them. I think probably Black has a better chance of sticking for the remainder of the season. So he'd probably be my top priority right now. Because
the Rockies don't like their prospects?
Because the Rockies are gonna Rocky.
Yeah. I fully agree, Scott.
The great Gene McCaffrey had a line once about the Rockies. He's a fantasy baseball writer who lives in Colorado. And he once said of the Rockies, they can't wait to get their best lineup off the field. That's always been the Colorado problem. And a team, again, what is their objective, right? They're the worst team in the NL West, really the only team that isn't trying right now. They should be about development and evaluating who is the cornerstone. What are the cornerstones on our roster for our next contender, in a few years, hopefully. So they should be, that should be their objective. I have no confidence that they'll handle it that way because they haven't for so long. So I think DJ's fears are warranted in this case.
Yeah. And if you want more information on both these guys, if you go to the NBC Sports YouTube page, we had Chris Clegg on our Q&A yesterday, Tuesday. He is like a heavy dynasty prospects guy. We talked at length about Tyler Black. And, Chris is a big fan. You're probably not going to get the normal power you would expect from a first baseman from Tyler Black, but you're going to get a good batting average and you're going to get a whole boatload of speed. And so there is some value there. Just some quick news and notes that we don't have to analyze, but just the people should know before we get to the Yahoo Friends and Family draft. Josh Lowe is restarting his rehab assignment, which was stopped because of a hamstring injury. They're going to take it day to day with him from this point on, but provided his hamstring continues to respond well to being in games, we should hopefully see Josh Lowe next week at some point in Tampa Bay. So that's something to keep an eye on. And then it's May 1st. And May 1st is an important date because a lot of veterans who signed minor league deals at the start of the year are able to opt out. So you're going to see a lot of guys opt out of deals today. We saw one, Dom Smith, opt out of his minor league deal with the Rays, and he was immediately signed by the Boston Red Sox. There is a thought that Masataka Yoshida is headed to the IL, so Dom Smith could take that spot of being like a left-handed hitting first baseman who can play a little outfield. So the Red Sox go from Tristan Casas at first base to a combo of Garrett Cooper and Dom Smith, which is exactly what you're looking for. But again, if you're in AL-only leagues, if you're in really deep formats, there's a chance that Dom Smith is going to see semi-regular 75% of the playing time at first base in Boston. Just a name to note. We're going to dive into this Yahoo Friends and Family draft. Before we get into the specific players that were picked and our thoughts on them, I wanted to ask each of you if your strategy changed at all from what you were how you were drafting in March. Now that we had more information, now that we had the slew of pitching injuries, etc. So Scott, did you approach this draft in any different way in terms of just global strategy?
Yeah, I did in kind of a quirky way. The editorial staff at Yahoo does maintain rest of season drafts, so we can update the draft applet. You can still draft. I'm not sure exactly when the window closes. I think it's in sometime in May, but as of right now, you can still do a Yahoo draft if you want. So if you have any FOMO looming in you and you want to, find an Elly De La Cruz share because you don't have any, go get a bunch of people together. You get 3 people together, do a 14 league, do whatever floats your boat. So we do maintain that list, and Dalton Del Don, my colleague who is in this draft, he goes in and does all the tinkering with it and everything. But the draft room the ranks are not perfect. There's a lot of buried treasure. There's a lot of misranked players, even with us putting in our best efforts. I mean, of course, we're covering football and doing all sorts of other things. So it's something that we have detail on, but it's maybe not, a 24/7 exercise. So I felt it was important. I didn't have time to redo all my hitting ranks and really go through it with a tooth and comb, but I re-ranked all the starting pitchers, re-ranked all the closers, and had a side document that I was maintaining during the draft. And then, of course, I'm drafting and I'm yucking it up with all my friends, and we're talking about stuff, and people are asking me questions because I was the de facto commission, all that stuff. So I felt maybe a little bit, I had too much stuff to handle, too much data, too much overload, sensory overload during the draft. I'm not sure if maintaining this side list helped me, other than I think I was more prepared maybe with the closer market than maybe some people were, like a Jason Foley type or something like that. But I thought it was important I normally wouldn't have I normally want to see what people are looking at in the draft room, and I'll scribble things on a piece of paper just to their top of mind, but I won't actually maintain a second list. I try to for about 2/3 of this draft, just to try to have something that was maybe more current and reflective of the current landscape as I viewed it.
Yeah. DJ, for you, any strategy difference?
I wouldn't say so, because I devalued starting pitching in most of my drafts this year. I wanted one starting pitcher I felt good about, then I waited, and that's pretty much what I did here too. But one thing I wanted to do was target players who were either hurt and could be back soon, or players who've underperformed so far, but I think they can do better. So I liked that strategy point where it's easy to, sort the leaderboard and, target those players, right? Because they've played well so far. But what about the ones who haven't, and they did something last year or have the track record, or, I drafted Josh Lowe, for example. I know he's had trouble coming back with the hamstring, but he could be back next week. Kodai Senga is, he could start a rehab assignment in a week or two. Players like that, I was aggressive for.
Yeah, I thought you had a really nice value on JD Martinez too. One reason why my strategy was much different in the sense that in a lot of cases, I did pay up for some of the early surprises, but I felt like that was mitigated by maybe them being misranked. for example, it's much easier to say this since he's had a 14 strikeout game after the draft, but I thought Jack Flaherty was misranked. So I got him at pick 186. Now, obviously, he just had a huge game. So if we redrafted tomorrow, he'd probably go like 40, 50 picks earlier than that. But I thought some players who were playing well, Joey Luperfido, we've been talking about a lot. We know that it was only a matter of time before the Astros had to make a move. That shoe dropped this week. Guys like that, I was willing to be proactive on. I really wanted to get DJ. You're the person who opened up my mind in the Mets bullpen and Reed Garrett, and I thought for sure he'd be on my team, but I didn't really know when to take him. And Jeff Erickson took him in the 20th round. He's going to be in on Reed Garrett's 20-win season, but
bullshitting wins left and right.
I guess the thing with like early surprise players is like there's two buckets of players who qualify. Like when Elly De La Cruz goes bananas in April, it significantly impacts his draft price.
Right.
But if, I don't know, Ahmad Rosario has a big first month, people aren't like, oh, okay, Ahmad Rosario is going to make the All-Star team or get MVP votes or something like that. People take it with a grain of salt. Kyle Finnegan has a ton of saves. Nobody really believes that has long-term staying power, so he was inexpensive. What a player's reputation was and upside was viewed as before the season has a lot to do with how the market reacts to that player. In the case of Elly, I wouldn't have been surprised if he went first or second. I think he went fifth in this draft, but I mean, that was to be expected. But some of the other breakout players, I think, were kind of reasonably priced.
Yeah. Let's just dive right into that right now. Before we get to Elly, there was a different number 1 overall pick than I think many would have expected because everybody, heading into the season, it was Acuna by a landslide. It actually wound up being Mookie Betts. And I know that on a lot of the player raters, Mookie Betts comes off as one of the top 2 or 3 players currently. So I guess my question I'll start with you, DJ, was just like, how did you react to Betts going first overall? Did that feel like we were relying too much on like player rater for 1 month? Or did you feel like given the fact that he's obviously very good and has so many positions of value that it's a pretty fair choice to pick him first?
I don't think you could go wrong with picking Mookie Betts first, which I think is the key point. You can put him anywhere, so it gives you a huge advantage to take him first and then see how the rest of your draft plays out. So from those two perspectives, fine. I do think I'm not worried about Acuna. Like, he did have the knee thing toward the end of spring training. His strikeout rate is like almost 30% so far after being like a career low last year. Like, is there something going on there? I'm not sure. So I wouldn't fault anyone if they went Betts first, but it would be hard for me to pass up on Acuna's upside if I was drafting first.
I agree. I know everybody talks about how few barrels Acuna has. I just don't see that as a skill issue that he's lacking. And I don't think it's tied to an injury like another player we'll talk about later, who I think the lack of barrels is tied to an injury. So for me, I would have gone Acuna. I still would have probably gone Acuna, Bobby Witt before I went to Mookie, but that's just me in particular. I still think those two guys have elite upside. Scott, you mentioned Elly, and obviously there was discussion of like, how high is Elly going to go? Will he go number 1? He went 5th, and I still think there's an argument to be made that's a little too rich. It's a little too high, but you also can't deny the progress he's made at the beginning of this year. Did you think that Elly going 5th was in the right range for him, or do you think maybe it's an overreaction to the first month of the season?
I thought he had to go in the first round. I had the 4th pick, even though I offered everybody in the draft the ability to set a KDS preference. And make sure you watch Kentucky Derby this Saturday, by the way, on related platforms. There's your promo. You'll probably read one later. It'll be better than my amateur one. But
you can never have too many promos.
Love Triple Crown season. I hope you guys watched some of the Sports Century stuff they did on horse racing at the end of the 1990s. It was fabulous. It's so good. So much of the smartest sports writers like covered horse racing, like William Nack of Sports Illustrated. I could listen to those guys talk all day. Bert Sugar, just fabulous. So I took the 4th pick. I had one of the earlier KDS picks. But my goal was to actually take the slot where I thought I could get Mookie Betts. By the time I picked 1, 2, and 3 were all gone. And I thought I probably won't get Mookie, but maybe I will. I'll take the 4th slot. And then Betts goes, Witt goes, Acuna goes. And I really wasn't sure what to do. And I did consider Elly. I did consider Kyle Tucker, who was the 6th pick in this draft. I considered Juan Soto, although he's a little bit of a frustrating great player for me because he's going to walk so much. He's got a little bit of that Joey Votto in him that he's just going to spit on so many pitches that are out of the strike zone. And sometimes you just wish maybe he'd expanded a little bit, and maybe he's more valuable to a real life offense than he is to a fantasy offense at times, even though he's obviously still a god. But I did consider Elly 4th overall because the Reds are going to run as much as they want. Elly's young. He's one of the fastest guys in baseball. He obviously has the power. You're going to get swing and miss. And there's going to be some months he's going to hit 211. I mean, it's who he is right now. We saw last year when he hit 192, I think it was after the break. But there's never been a better time to steal bases in modern baseball than now. They have all these rules set up. The pickoff throws are limited. Everybody knows, the catchers, all hate it. The pitchers all hate it. And the base stealers are like, oh, great, I can run whenever I want. Trey Turner says it's almost too easy to steal, to the point that his stolen base streak was broken by a double steal of home plate because Trey Turner I don't know why Turner doesn't steal 60 bases a year, because he could have wanted to, any number really. But I considered Elly at 4, and the reason why I took Ohtani, and by the way, I don't mind Betts at 1 because I think first round picks, everybody who goes to the first round has MVP upside, has number 1 player rater end of season upside, and Betts has such a high floor. The trigger man to that LA offense. He covers the 3 positions. You get a 5 category base when you draft him. He's obviously proven to be durable. He takes care of himself. He's such a likable player. Not that Ronald Acuna isn't likable, or any of these guys aren't likable, but I don't think Betts is ever a bad pick in any slot. But I ultimately took Ohtani because I didn't have any Ohtani shares. I have Betts other places. I have Freeman other places. I know it's overly simplistic, but get great players on great offenses. Okay. It'll be fun to have an investment in Shohei Ohtani, or the rare nights I go to bed early. Maybe I'll wake up and it's like, oh, Ohtani knocked in 5 runs last night, or stole a couple of bases or something like that. But Elly De La Cruz went to the 5th pick to Jorge Martin. And I think if you had asked me before the draft, where's Elly going to go? I would have said top half of the first round. So I think that was actually a par.
So I had him just around 10th, 10th or 11th. For me, I was trying to be cautious about overreacting to 1 month when I think there's still some things in the profile that, as to your point to volatility, not point to him being a bad player, right? I'm not suggesting Elly De La Cruz is going to fall on his face. I think that the hand-wringing that I was doing also at the beginning of the season about him being overdrafted where he was going, I think we've gone past that conversation because he has made clear gains in his plate discipline, which has led to just better production overall. And I think it's pretty clear he is a 1st or 2nd round player, depending on your league size. The reasons why I think top half of the 1st round I was a little concerned by are, first of all, he has major splits issues. We don't talk about that, but he is a switch hitter that probably shouldn't be a switch hitter, because for his career, and I understand, we're talking about 151 at bats against left-handed pitching. So it's not a huge sample size, but 151 bats against left-handed pitching is, almost a season, I would say. He hits 199 against lefties with a 38% strikeout rate. Against righties, he hits 264 with a 30% strikeout rate. His slug and ISO are higher against righties. He just hits better as a left-handed hitter. And so if he struggles against lefties over the course of a full season, I think that impacts the stats a little bit more. Also, he is currently running a 57% homer to fly ball ratio. That is going to regress. That is ridiculously high. He hits 50% ground balls. So he is somebody, but we know he hits the ball really hard. So he's going to have a high homer to fly ball ratio, because when he gets the ball in the air, he's hitting it really hard, and it's going to leave the yard. But 57% is ridiculous. He's not keeping up a 57% homer to fly ball ratio. And then you look at other things of his zone contact rate is actually down from last year. his contact rate is down from last year. It's just 66%. His swinging strike rate is up from last year. His expected batting average on the year is just 219. So again, these are not things where you say, 216. But these are not things where you say, oh, okay, Elly De La Cruz is a 216 hitter. But it is something where you say, okay, we're seeing the hot streak right now. Like we're seeing the upper echelon of what he can produce. And that's great. But there is going to be some regression at some point where he has a month where he's closer to like a 220 batting average, where the swinging strike rate catches up with him a little bit, where that homer to fly ball ratio isn't 57%, where he faces a lot of lefties in a given month. And so he struggles in that month. And so for me, that put him kind of in the back half of the first round, where I wasn't going to take him over guys that I think consistently produce and have produced for a long period of time, like your Kyle Tuckers, like your Freddie Freemans, like, guys like that, where I just know I'm not getting that kind of volatility.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And there are going to be peaks and valleys, especially if there's a stretch where there's a bunch of lefties that the Reds are facing. So I think you're going to have to take the good with the bad. But given how well he performed in the first month, I think in most drafts, even expert leagues like this is, he's going to go super early. Like that's just a fact. And if you have that hesitation, you're not going to get him. Well, obviously,
we're also all human. And like Scott and I talk a lot on this about like, having FOMO of, not getting some guys. And so if you're drafting and you have the chance to get Elly De La Cruz with as well as he's producing right now, like how are you not going to do it? I fully understand, especially with your finger on the button. I didn't have the choice, right? I picked 10th. He wasn't on the board. It wasn't an option for me. But I understand having your finger on there and being like, am I really going to not take him? Like, don't I want to be in on this? And I get that fully.
How do you feel, Eric? Well, how do you feel about Gunnar Henderson versus Elly De La Cruz? Because Gunnar went 11th, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, right? I had Elly higher.
Okay,
I had Elly higher. I had Elly 11th, I think, and that was obviously including pitchers, not just with hitters. Even though like I had like Corbin Burnes ranked ahead of Elly, but I think at the end of the day, like I don't know that I would have actually done that because of my draft strategy in general. But I had Elly above Gunnar Henderson. And
Elly and Henderson were basically the party crashers of the first round. Everybody else was the names you would have expected.
Well, and that's what I wanted to bring up to you is like the pitcher who got drafted in the first round, the name changed. It was kind of the same spot. But I was curious, Scott, on your take on this. Corbin Burnes went 8th to Fred Zinke, and he and Jeff Erickson recorded a podcast already breaking down this draft. And so I was able to hear, Fred's thoughts on why he took Corbin Burnes. And his thought was that he actually wanted to prioritize starting pitching early because he felt like after a month into the season, we've kind of we're past that first benchmark of pitcher injuries, right? With spring training and the early start to the year. So we have a little bit more understanding of like who's going to get hurt or who's not, which is like, and listen, not a knock on Fred. It makes total sense logically. But then obviously an hour after I listened to that podcast, Grayson Rodriguez goes on the IL. And so you're kind of like, maybe we didn't miss that benchmark. But he wanted to load up on pitching because he felt like the chaos caused him to want to make sure that he got secure, good starting pitchers early. And I'm curious on you, if you had the same thought, Scott, if you would have taken Burnes 8th. I think he's the clear top pitcher now, but the counter argument to Fred's is we lost the two clear best pitchers and the rest was kind of muddled. So maybe it makes even more sense to wait and see what the muddled mess does and take whoever emerges from that.
Fred's draft was fascinating. I thought the most interesting draft of the 13 teams. He's obviously a well-respected industry writer, analyst, and a really good fantasy player. Do not make trades with Fred Zinke. You will lose those trades. So DJ talked about the idea of maybe having that one staff anchor. And that was my idea coming in that, okay, 3rd or 4th round, I'm going to get a Logan Webb. I'm going to get one of the Seattle pitchers, something like that. And I'll every 3 or 4 rounds, I'll chip away and build a staff that way. And my ethos pretty much the entire time I've been playing fantasy has been go out and get the hitting. It's more reliable, and then figure out what the pitching looks like. What pitching did you land? What pitching do you need to pick up? What pitching do you need to trade for once the season crystallizes a little bit and it feels like it's a safer time to invest in it? I'm actually embarrassed that I never thought until this year when it's been talked about a lot, is there a cadence to the end? And I still need to see like data on this, and I'm sure people are breaking it down, and maybe there's some great pieces that I haven't read yet on it, but is it actually a thing that April is like, okay, let's just get through April, and then the pitcher injuries will slow down significantly, and every season has different challenges. There's been years, 1 year there was a lockout and spring training cadence was all messed up, but I've always liked the idea of fixing my pitching as the season went along, and there'll be surprise pitchers that come into the league. You're much more likely to find, say, a top 35, a top 40 starting pitcher on the waiver wire than you would a top 35 or top 40 hitter. So look, Fred took this to an extreme because he started Burnes, Skubal, Peralta, and Nola. Pitcher. His first hitter is Ha-Seong Kim, who's off to a really poor start, and even at his best, he just not sound like the front man of an offense. And then he took Teoscar Hernandez, who's a good player, certainly not a great player. I mean, everybody knows if you start with 4 pitchers, you're going to be playing catch up on offense, and I'd be afraid I wouldn't be able to catch up. And Fred, again, known for his trading, maybe he's going to trade from a position of strength. Sure. But I do, even though I think he went further than the strategy that I would have wanted to, if, like, say, we were teammates or something or partners, the idea that maybe, okay, we're out of the woods with the worst of the pitching injuries. I don't know if that's true or not, but it sounds like it could be true. And so I think Fred's experiment here, which is what I'll call it, we're in the age of experimentation, right? I mean, I've seen people in expert leagues the last couple of years not draft any starting pitching and try to win a league. And every league is different. And some leagues allow for more offbeat strategies, but this felt like the most extreme strategy to a player I really respect. And I'm going to be keeping a keen eye on how it works. I wouldn't have tried to execute it. I think it hurt me because I never did get that SP1. And I felt like I was scrambling to fill. There was a massive pitching run that I was locked out of, and I'm still kind of salty about it. But this, to me, is the biggest talking point of the draft, is what Fred did. And even though I wouldn't have done it, I think the root of the idea makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I even said in the chat in the draft, man, none of these hitters are any good. And this was like early on in the draft.
Yeah,
I felt like it got ugly from a hitting side early. And so I wound up being glad that I went hitting early on, because I felt like I at least had some guys that I had some confidence in. And then you start to get the, like, is this guy for real? Like, guys we'll talk about later who pushed up into like the top 80 picks who were going near like 200 early on.
Well, you actually did take a lot of early pitching. 4 of your first 8 picks were pitchers and 6 of your first 11 picks for pitchers.
Well, but that was the nature of how the draft fell, right? So I wound up taking Luis Castillo with my 3rd round pick, but I had the 10th pick in the round. So I got Luis Castillo all the way at the end of the 3rd round, when in the regular season he was going at the end of the 2nd or the start of the 3rd round as like the 5th starter off the board. So I wasn't planning on taking a starter there, but I was just kind of like, he's still my 5th starting pitcher.
Yeah.
And I don't know why we've pushed him all the way down the board. And then the same thing with, like, I took Cole Reagans as my 2nd starter. And that was, again, me just going, I don't love any of the hitting right now. And so it wasn't my plan, but I got my 2 hitters out of the way first, and then things opened up for me. But I didn't want to go in attacking pitching.
I did also like that, by the way, you started with Julio Rodriguez, pick 10, Austin Riley at pick 17. That's a classic case of these are great players off to slow starts.
Slow start.
Yeah.
You're getting it. You're basically clipping a coupon on both of them, right?
What do you think of Corbin Carroll? Corbin Carroll going where he went 25th?
Yeah, Corbin Carroll went 25th.
Petrified to Dalton Del Don. Petrified to take him. He was basically not on my board.
I kind of am the same as Scott. Like, I hate saying he's not on my board. Like, I would have taken him at some point.
Effectively not on my board. I knew somebody would take him. I mean, that's the point.
No, I fully agree with you. Like, Scott and I have talked a few times at length about, I don't think the power is there. We both are concerned enough about the shoulder. I know he's going to run, but like if he's currently hitting 193, right? Maybe he hits 260, 270 the rest of the way. He's not making any kind of authoritative contact. I know that the Diamondbacks haven't said anything about his shoulder being an issue, but it tracks back to the game he left with a shoulder injury where he grabbed his shoulder and he walked off and he missed a couple of games and he never had surgery on it, came back and played through it. And the power has just been dry since then.
Yep.
I don't think he's healthy. I don't think he has the same contact authority. So if you're telling me I'm getting a 260 hitter who's going to hit 10 home runs and steal 30 to 40 bases, I would ask you if I'm drafting Jarren Duran.
I was going to say Jarren Duran. That's the comp at this point. And you look at Corbin Carroll's batted ball data. He's in the bottom 4 percentile of the league in average exit velocity. He's in the bottom 8th percentile in the league in hard hit percentage. It's pointing to some sort of physical issue. And we know what happened last year with the swing in his shoulder. And this is something you talked about before or during draft season, Eric, and I should have listened to you. This was an existing shoulder issue and nothing was, there was no surgical repair. So, I mean, we'll see how the Diamondbacks season plays out. Does it reach a certain point where the Diamondbacks are like, hey, maybe get this fixed? Things aren't going to work out for us this year, but I was similarly, because I drafted 6th, I took Juan Soto. I was not even thinking about Corbin Carroll in that spot.
Yeah, and remember, too, we're talking about a guy with Carroll, 5'10", 165 pounds, right? I always feel his power is a little bit on the margins anyway, even if healthy. And I mentioned Fred Zinke having the most interesting draft. Dalton Del Don may have had the second most interesting draft because he just said, I'm just going upside, and I'm not worried about it. Everybody's got a downside. Corbin Carroll, I'll take him. Vladimir Guerrero, I'll take him. Josh Hader, horrible first month, I'll take him. Chris Sale, never stays healthy, I'll take him. Bednar's off to a little bit of a rocky start. Blake Snell, on and on. He has Giancarlo Stanton, of course. He just said, what's the upside? I'll buy it. Some of these guys, he even drafted Hunter Brown at the end of the draft, who I would suspect he may cut when the first FAB bidding goes through. And then we're doing twice weekly FAB bids this year instead of the first come, first serve stuff. But Dalton basically just steered into the upside and did not worry about floor whatsoever.
I will say I'm curious why I think we have correctly dinged Corbin Carroll, but we didn't ding Aaron Judge at all. Another hitter who I don't think is healthy. Judge went 13th. And so I'm not saying Judge should, I'm not as concerned about Judge as I am about Corbin Carroll at all. However, we know Aaron Judge had 2 different injuries in spring. We know that he said he was going to have to manage the toe injury all season long. Aaron Judge has a 12.5% barrel rate, which may not sound terrible to you, but it is the lowest barrel rate by a significant amount for him in any season other than the COVID-shortened 2020 season. He's pulling the ball less than he ever has in his career. His pull rate is 10% less than it was last year. He's hitting the ball on the ground almost as much as he has in any season before. So these to me are signs of a hitter who is not he's not right. He's not fully right. This is a power hitter who gets his foot down. He turns on balls. He hits them with authority. He's not doing that as much as he was before. His surface level stats, the 6 home runs are great. A 207 batting average is not particularly good. I don't think alarm bells are going off in the same way they are for Corbin Carroll, but I do wonder if he should have been dinged a little bit more in this draft as somebody who may not be 100% and may not actually be at 100% for a good majority of the season.
Yeah, I didn't like the pick, and it went to Scott Genstad of RotoWire, a good friend of mine, the defending champion of the Friends and Family League, certainly a really good fantasy player. He's done really well in some high-stakes contests as well, so much respect to Scott. We're allowed to disagree on things. And not only does he take Judge, who all the stuff you outlined, he's just basically going to be somebody you have to maintain a watch on the whole season. And then he backed it up with Wheeler, Diaz, and Lopez, 3 pitchers. So he's so far behind. I don't think Scott can ever catch up in stolen bases unless he trades like a madman, because Judge isn't going to run. I don't know who O'Neal Cruz is right now. He was the 5th round pick. Randy Arozarena is off to a horrible start. He should steal 20 bases, but this team is not going to run. And Judge, I feel like there's like a 25 to 35% chance that like the awful Rotoworld note is coming on Aaron Judge at any point during the season. I could not consider him in the first round.
It's possible. We'll see. We're going to get to more of this draft talk, but before we do that, it's the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. Don't miss the 150th running of the Kentucky Derby at Churchill Downs. Coverage starts at 2:30 p.m. Eastern this Saturday, only on NBC and Peacock. Again, the Kentucky Derby at Churchill Downs. Coverage starts at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time this Saturday, only on NBC and Peacock. A couple final players I wanted to talk about before we, in this draft in particular, before we just get to some, hey, this guy's off to a good start. Do we believe it or not? Yeah. CJ Abrams is somebody who I put out a video when we were doing our, an ADP YouTube series. And I said, 4th round CJ Abrams is a really good value. I bought into the second half changes that he made and was like, he's only 22 at the time of recording. And so there's reason to believe we haven't seen the end of, what he could do. A lot of mean things were said to me on YouTube and on social media. And now CJ Abrams went 18th overall in this draft. I assume we all understand, like we're all in agreement that it's just a, prospect growth isn't linear. It took him a while to get going, but he's 23 and we're seeing him, emerge into the talent that he kind of always had in prospect circles.
Yeah, absolutely. He's hitting the ball harder. He's striking out less this year. He's chasing a little more, which is interesting to see. And we know the speed's there as well. The Nationals love to run. He's at the top of that lineup. Like, there's so many things in his favor. I just wish the Nationals lineup was better. But they're not terrible either. Hopefully Lane Thomas comes back at some point soon. But yeah, this is someone who had the prospect pedigree, was very young when he started out with the Nationals after the trade. But yeah, it seems like everything is coming together for him. Burgeoning superstar. I could see next year, potentially. It is early to make these kind of pronouncements, but I could see him be a, second round pick, late first round next year.
Really, really tidy. He's going to be the player this year that we thought Corbin Carroll was going to be.
Like to hear that. Okay. I wish I had shares of him in this draft. He went so early. I didn't get a chance. I also wanted to ask you guys about Tyler Glasnow. Tyler Glasnow went 20th overall in this draft, and that's a huge change from where he was going in March. And I'm curious if everybody just kind of like, well, all the pitchers are hurt, so we'll take him 20th. I mean, we knew Tyler Glasnow was good when he was healthy. The question was, how many innings is he going to throw? Yes. Unless we now all of a sudden think he's going to throw more innings than we thought heading into the year. 20th seems a little high, or do you think, Scott, the changing landscape has made it? Or DJ, you want to jump in?
I drafted
DJ took him. So you get the first
round. What?
So
why, DJ?
Yeah. I am out of here. No, I wanted Skubal. I believe he went right before me.
Did.
I was ready. I was ready to click draft on Skubal.
Sniped.
So next up for me was Glasnow, because I am of the opinion that it's like so many pitchers are getting hurt on ability. Glasnow's an ace. He's a top line pitcher. I think he's day to day right now. Like, it's not a long-term concern, but as far as just sort of the pitching landscape right now, it's like, who's to say Glasnow is any bigger risk than any of these other guys? And he's in a great situation. So I was totally fine with him being my number one.
This reminds me of the Simpsons episode. Excuse me, Eric, where they did the softball team, and every player every Major League Baseball ringer, Wade Boggs, Roger Clemens, Ken Griffey Jr., they all had something go wrong with them. And the only player who was unscathed was Darryl Strawberry, who, had a very strange career that was checkered with all sorts of personal problems. And this reminds me of Glasnow, where this is a guy who never gets past 120 innings, and everybody's you draft him, he's going to get hurt at some point, and you're going to be frustrated. And then in April, everybody's hurt, and Tyler Glasnow is the Darryl Strawberry, the last man standing, who's having this unbelievable start. Look, it's never been a question of talent with Glasnow. I still think that load management, Dodgeritis will kick in at some point, because this is a team. Obviously, they're going to get the NL West title in the mail, and they can set up their rotation months ahead of time. So when he has any kind of a hiccup or a burp, they're going to put him on ice. They may do it anyway, and they have some really interesting pitch. Kershaw will come back, Buehler will come back. We'll see what versions of them. I have no idea what Walker Buehler is going to be. He didn't pitch well in his rehab starts, but we'll see.
It's interesting to see how this goes. And DJ and I will, they're pitchers that we each drafted, so we'll see how it goes the rest of the season. For me, I'm surprised that you took Glasnow over somebody like Luis Castillo, who we've seen have the track record, but also have way more history of durability. And so there are things like that. And I understand Kirby is another one, but I understand, Kirby's been hit or miss at times, and Glasnow's ceiling might be higher. So I fully get that. And I agree with you that, at the beginning of the season, we were saying I was if all pitchers are going to get injured at some point, or if pitching is risky, lean into the risk. And so I get taking Glasnow. I think it's just it is an interesting correction from where he was going in most March drafts, where people were still wary of saying, I'm going to take on that risk. Now you're kind of thinking there's just risk everywhere. So I'll take it on at the time where in the draft where his talent seems to dictate is where he should go.
I should also say, Scooble went right before me. I was kind of anticipating a run on the select group of top starting pitchers. And after Glasnow went off the board, I don't believe there was another starting pitcher taken until after my next pick of the third round. So 14, 15 picks, no starting pitchers were taken. That surprised me a little bit, that there was a little bit of a gap before that Mariners starting pitcher run that we saw.
It did wait a while, and I was happy with it because guys got back to me. I want to ask you guys about. I feel like I always bring up Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and I promise I'm not picking on him. I have no issue with him as a human being. His draft spot dropped a little bit. In ADP in March, he was going kind of around the end of the 30s. He went 51st in this draft. I was curious what your guys' thoughts were on him going 51st, considering that was 11 picks ahead of Christian Walker, who has been better and might be better, and was 36 picks ahead of Josh Naylor, who seems like he's in the middle of a breakout and might be kind of the player that we thought Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was. So Scott, we've talked about him before, but do you think that 51st is a good range for Vlad, or is it still wish casting on him a little bit too much?
Really simple for me. Again, that was part of that Dalton Del Don hair on fire draft, and it'll look great if a lot of these guys hit. But to me, the players you mentioned who went after him, this is a case of you can take the name brand, or you can take the generic. I think you do so much better with the generic. You don't know when you take Vladimir Guerrero. For all you know, Christian Walker could go 3 or 4 picks later. I mean, it's hard to know, especially the uncertain ADP behavior of a draft a month into the season. But I thought there was enough depth at first base, and Guerrero has kind of leveled off enough that I don't see him as a top 50 player right now.
I fully agree with you.
I agree. He wasn't on my he's not someone I'm excited to pick at this point. I think that probably goes for probably most in the industry right now, because we haven't seen the big power numbers. He's striking out more this year as well. So if the batting average upside isn't there either, and he doesn't run, it's what are you really getting other than, a couple of seasons ago and, sort of that brand name like Scott was saying.
I will also say in Dalton's defense that was a time where the offense was starting to feel gross, where the players you were taking in the top 50 didn't really feel like top 50 hitters. Right. I was prepared to take a pitcher in the 4th round. There were at one point 10 pitchers went in a row between 2 of my picks, and Logan Webb, who I was going to take if he got to me, went 1 pick ahead of me. I didn't know what to do. I took Jazz Chisholm, a player I don't know why I keep drafting him. He's driving me crazy. The best thing I can say about Jazz Chisholm, when he leaves a game early, it's probably because he got ejected. Although maybe it's because he got hurt. He got ejected Tuesday night. But I think I screwed up that pick. I got it right in the 5th round. I took the grossly underrated Marcell Ozuna, who has been like a first-round player over the last 365 days. I realize, there's some off-the-field issues with Ozuna that make him kind of a hard guy to root for at times. But I should have taken Ozuna in the 4th round. But what I will say in defense of the Guerrero pick is just, Xander Bogaerts went before Guerrero. I mean, I don't know how great Bogaerts is a solid player. I don't think he's a great player. Manny Machado has some baggage. He went in that round. Adley Rutschman went. He's great, but it's a 1-catcher format. I think the offense was starting to. There are still good offensive players. I didn't feel like there were any really great offensive players left, unless you're willing to give Ozuna that benefit of the doubt.
I guess that segues like he went. So I wound up taking Christian Walker in the next round, which I feel okay with. But he went when you're saying like Guerrero went because not a lot of hitters were there. I'm curious why I feel like we pivoted as a league this draft away from relievers in a way that like we're usually seeing like stud relievers going early. And so like DJ gets Emmanuel Clase in the next round about 9 picks after Vladimir Guerrero went. Clase has been one of the best closers in baseball at the start of the year. I think that given the Guardians team makeup, they're probably going to be winning a fair amount of games and not by a lot of runs. So I guess I'm curious, DJ, first of all, Clase seemed like a really good pick. I'm sure you're happy about it. Were you surprised he was there? And why do you think that so many relievers seem to be available later than maybe had this draft been done in March?
I think it might have been a side effect of people sorting the saves leaderboard and seeing like, hey, Jason Foley's, gotten a ton of saves, and the Nationals situation. Like, it's a reminder that saves can come from anywhere. Like Mason Miller's been a stud. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, so I think maybe the urgency wasn't as much there because you feel like, and I do think this may be a little different than previous seasons where it seems like a lot of teams have their locked in guys. Mm-hmm. They've decided roles now that we're, quite a bit. And we're in May. It's May 1st. Teams have decided roles and who has them, at least for now. So I think managers felt a little bit safer about getting saves later.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that that's the strategy. I just was curious. I felt like people now that we knew who the guys were, I felt like making sure I got at least one of the guys made a lot of sense to me because I didn't have to worry about like speculating on saves and stuff later. Right. And so, it took me a little while to land on a guy. But, I wound up taking Yohan Duran at the end of the 7th round. And we did this draft when it was already announced he was being activated on Tuesday. So we knew he was back. We knew he would be back for the first game. And so this is a guy I had as like, I think my 2nd closer or 3rd ranked closer. And he's in the end of the 7th round. Josh Hader was at the end of the 6th round. Clay Holmes, who has tons of saves on a Yankees team, went after Kirby Yates. And Scott, you were the one who was able to get him. Jordan Romano, now fully healthy and back, went at the end of the 8th round. Ryan Helsley, who, Greg Jewett put out his updated rankings at The Athletic. And Helsley is his number 1 closer, and he went in the middle of the 8th round. So to me, it just felt like we waited on guys who, like, we knew they were the guy, and I would maybe have taken those guys a little early just to make sure I had it locked in.
Yeah, I think DJ nailed it with it's been a clean run out for closers for the most part, where most teams only have one guy. And this was a unusually relaxing draft for relief pitchers. Usually it's kind of like a rat race. And when a semi-run starts, it's like, oh, geez, am I going to get involved in this? If I get involved in it, I'm going to hate missing the bat or the starting pitcher I'm not taking. If I don't get involved in it, then I'm worried that I'm just going to have to scramble all year and waste fab or stay up late and pick closers on bad teams and just get have a heart attack with that. So it's almost like everybody said, hey, just chill. The market's fine. If you want to go get the best closer, like Clase could be the best closer, 6th round, totally reasonable. If you want to go a little bit later, I couldn't believe. I look, I'm a Red Sox fan, like Eric. I hate the Yankees. The last thing I want to do is root for them to win games and have Clay Holmes get saves. But I just couldn't say no to it. I'm like, why is Clay Holmes here? This doesn't make any. I mean, as you said,
why did Jason Foley go so late? I was surprised by that, and I wanted him. And you got him a couple of picks before me, and then I took James McArthur, who has been good. The Royals look frisky. They look like they could be a pretty good team.
That's another thing too, right? Which is probably percolating into this. Baseball seems to have like 3 to 5 teams that are awful. And then everybody else is either like kind of like plucky, like the Nationals are plucky. The Royals have a winning record right now. Detroit thinks they can win that division. So they have the plucky teams. They're going to have a 25 or 30 save guy, or then the teams that are going to make the playoffs or be contending for the playoffs. So I feel like there's like maybe 25 or 26 save relevant franchises. Yeah, maybe chasing your tail for saves in Miami or the White Sox. Maybe that's a fool's errand. But even the A's, as much of a mess as that team is, I mean, Mason Miller is unfreaking believable. The moment he comes into a game, you have to change the channel and watch him, because he's if the Kentucky Derby is the most exciting 2 minutes in sports right now, I mean, Mason Miller pitching is like the most exciting 5 minutes, and that's all it takes. 13 pitches, 3 strikeouts, and everybody shakes hands. It's unbelievable. But it was nice to have a draft where you didn't have to get all anxious and nervous about saves. I felt like this draft was like that.
A couple young players I want to just touch on before we get out of here. Wyatt Langford still went inside the top 100. He went 92nd overall. He is currently hitting .238, and that's with a .304 BABIP, by the way. Just 1 home run, 1 steal. I was surprised he went still inside of the top 100. DJ, thoughts?
I'm surprised as well. And what's funny, his home run inside the park.
Isn't inside the park home run. Yeah.
I want to do some research here. Like, how many players' first home runs have been inside the park home runs? Like, it's probably not a lengthy list.
Probably Willie Wilson's on that list, I bet. Or Vince Coleman or somebody like that,
Now I can't sleep until I look that up. But he's struggled a bit. I do think that the speed gives him somewhat of a safer floor as he tries to figure some stuff out. But I mean, the Rangers are a team with designs on the postseason. So if these young outfielders continue to struggle, Evan Carter's also had his struggles to begin the season. Like, who knows how this might turn out? I probably wouldn't have taken Langford. I think the helium was the spring training hype, and now we're kind of getting the reality that nobody's a sure thing.
Right. Yeah, and we've seen other high-end prospects fall and be, demoted, and there's no reason to think that couldn't be Langford.
I would have rather had Evan Carter, by the way, who went around the same pocket. He went at pick 109. I feel safer about Carter.
I could see that. I want to ask you about the 3 biggest risers to me, Scott, when it came to starting pitching. And if you believe in all 3 of these guys, if you believe in, one more than the other. We saw Shota Imanaga go 55th overall. That was before Zach Gallen, mind you. Also before Zach Gallen was Ronel Blanco, who went 58th overall. And then Ranger Suarez, who went 73rd overall. Scott, your reaction to those big kind of starting pitcher jumps?
I know we're a little pressed for time, so I'll use the stoplight. Imanaga is the green light. Suarez is the yellow light. And Blanco, very surprised he went that early. To me, he's the red light. He'd be the guy to be afraid to believe in.
DJ?
I think you nailed it. No, I think you nailed it. I'm very impressed with Imanaga, and it's kind of crazy. It looks like the Cubs got a tremendous value with that contract. It almost looked like a value from day one, unless there was some sort of physical concern. Maybe
he's going to be one of the top 10 right answers this season. That's how, and I know Eric was really in on Imanaga all preseason, and I did get some shares. And I think doing this podcast with Eric was a big reason why, but he fits the type of pitcher that succeeds in baseball today, where he throws strikes. He can go deep into games. He'll have a better chance at wins. He'll get strikeouts through innings volume. He's not a quote unquote strikeout pitcher, but he can miss enough bats. What a great signing for the Cubs, and really just relaxing to watch as well.
Yeah, love watching Imanaga. I'm with you guys. I couldn't have taken Blanco this early. I understand he's looked great, and Ranger Suarez, like, he is who he is. Like, we've seen him go on stretches like this before. It just happens that it's the first month of the season, but we've seen him do this. I was shocked. Like, Scott got Framber Valdez just 2 picks after. Chris Sale went after. And like Sonny Gray went after. Like these are pitchers I was really surprised.
Me too. Sonny Gray's so underrated.
We're going after Ranger Suarez. Let's take it out with this. I'm going to ask each of you guys just a pick that you from your own team that you felt happiest about, and a pick that maybe you would do things differently if you could go back on it. DJ, we'll start with you.
So my favorite pick was JD Martinez. And I think it's one of those things where I don't know if the room was like, oh yeah, he did, he is with the Mets now. It's one of those things where he has the track record. He doesn't have the stats so far this season. So maybe he just wasn't top of mind for a lot of people, but I was really happy to get him, especially because he's outfield eligible in Yahoo. We didn't really get into this as far as my picks, but Nico Horner, I was a little bit like, but I had no speed at that point. I know he hasn't run so far, but he's near the top of the Cubs lineup. He has the speed. It's not like he's not fast. And he struggled a little bit to begin the season. So maybe some of this just hasn't been getting on base as much as last year. Didn't love the pick, but that doesn't mean it's not going to turn out well. But I didn't love it. It was kind of a hold my nose kind of pick.
You also took a really fun pick in Paul Skeens, pick 189. I feel like that call up is just, it's imminent. It's coming this month.
True.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Scott, what about you? Your reaction to your team?
I loved Ozuna, pick 56. I think he should have gone in the 3rd or 4th round. And I'm glad I just got my wits back after that pitching run, because I hated the Jazz Chisholm pick in round 4. I think I'm going to regret that. I probably paid too much for Bryce Terang. I took him at pick 108. I think he's a nice player, but that's the high end of his range. And how can I not be excited about Jack Flaherty? If Jack Flaherty doesn't work out this year, it's because he got hurt. All of the ERA estimators say he should have like a mid-2 ERA. Forget the ERA. The stuff is popping off the screen. The walk strikeout rate is great. Mm-hmm. I mean, he looks just as good as he ever did in St. Louis, and he was like a borderline Cy Young candidate for the Cardinals. So I did not, much like DJ, kind of put starting pitcher on the back burner, and maybe like a guy like Skeens could be a shot in the arm. If my staff is going to be good enough to contend for a title, it's going to be because people like Flaherty were effective all season. Again, I think the stuff's there. It's just a matter of him staying healthy. I realize that's a huge ask for anybody in baseball today, but I can't wait for his next start.
Yeah, I really liked my Yohan Duran pick at the end of the 7th. I thought like that was
already has a save
value for where I was getting him. I liked getting Jared Jones in the 9th round.
The whole room wanted him. The whole room got mad at you when you made that pick.
Where he was going, like, again, after Ranger Suarez, like, to me, that's not really even a question.
Yeah, that's kind of weird, right?
Yes, I think so. I was, and I think it may have been just because, obviously the Yahoo draft board is influenced by the preseason ranks. And so he was lower down. I'm upset with myself that I drafted Kyle Bradish in the 10th round. I didn't need a starting pitcher. I knew he was coming back. I'm not confident in his ability to make starts for the whole season, and it cost me Michael Garcia, and that caused me to make some decisions to get speed later that I didn't necessarily want to make. And so
I want to mention just one more quick guy. He's a hot button player. Jackson Holiday had a ballyhooed call up. He played 10 games, struck out 1 million times, didn't hit at all. He's been sent down. I really liked a lot of Jorge Martin's picks, and I'm actually going to podcast with him later today and talk more about this draft. He took Holiday in the 20th round, so it wasn't prohibitively expensive, but I think he's a drop in a league of this size because he's in the minors now. When he comes up, he's going to bat 9th. I don't think he's going to have the confidence to run, and as great as his pedigree is, he's 20 years old. Baseball's hard. I don't think he's rostered. We're a 13-team league. I know most people 10-team, 12-team, 15-team. 13 is kind of an odd number, but let's say you're out there in a 10-team or 12-team league. I would, unless these circumstances were very particular in favor of doing this, I would not roster Jackson Holiday right now.
That's fair.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't disagree with you on that. We'll keep talking about this. We've got DJ's got a nice power rankings piece coming out, which will look at all of the kind of where the baseball teams stack up right now. I have my Mixing It Up column out on NBC Sports this morning, looking at some pitches with new pitches, including Kevin Gossman and Dylan Cease, and broke down pretty much all of Ben Lively's pitch mix, because most people are thinking, what does he even throw? I don't have no idea. So you can check that out over on NBC Sports. You can follow all of us on Twitter. I'm at Samsky NYC. Scott is at Scott_Pianowski. And DJ is at DJ Short. And Scott and I will be back with you on Monday talking about the weekend that was. So we'll check you for another episode of the Rotoworld Baseball Show.